this week, and Lindsey Graham, chairman of the Judiciary Committee, we will hold hearings, and there will be a vote on the floor of the United States Senate this year.
But not if Senate Democrats can help it. He was on NBC's Meet the Press.
A new poll suggests 6 out of 10 Americans want that Supreme Court seat filled after the election. CBS News Special Report. I'm Vicki Barker.
Good morning, Bisbee. Good morning, Barnesville, home of the Trojans. Thank you for making KFGO number one in the morning, number one all day long. The KFGO Morning Crew, Doug Leier, Amistadi, getting your Monday morning set for you.
And we always enjoy checking in with the State Patrol, Minnesota Highway Patrol Sergeant Jesse Grabow, joining us now on the KFGO Morning Crew. Good morning to you, Jess.
Hey, good morning.
Hey, Jesse, before we dig too deep into it, I mean, After that Vikings game yesterday, could Kirk Cousins be charged with, care required or exhibition driving? There was something illegal about that performance yesterday, wasn't there?
Lots of room for improvement. There's no doubt about that.
No kidding. Well, wanted to ask you, Jess, first off, DPS just put out some stats, a recent DWI campaign. Deputies, troopers across the state arrested 1,649 drivers for driving impaired, which is the highest number in 5 years, 200 more than last year. Does that seem to be a pattern this year? Maybe people letting out frustrations here or hitting the bottle, I guess, and getting behind the wheel?
It's really interesting, when we talked about everything we've talked about over the course of the year with, maybe limited services as far as bars and things like that in restaurants. So, the responsibility always falls down to the motorist, the driver, the choices you're going to make each and every time you get in that vehicle. And, yeah, it is concerning because, again, with more impaired arrests, what else do we see going along with this? And we see an increase in the amount of fatal crashes we have on our Minnesota roads also.
Yeah, I was wondering, too, maybe if speed citations are up or just anecdotally from what you and the other troopers are chatting about or seeing out there with the pandemic, maybe people with a little bit of a lead foot out there?
Well, certainly. The number one factor in our fatal crashes is speed, and with that being said, too, that's what we're seeing. And when we talk speed and fatal crashes, it can be from 10 to 15 miles an hour over that speed limit in that area. But we've seen this speed significantly increase, too, with just the things over 100 miles an hour. It seems like it's been all too often. So we are out there still doing our job. A lot of services and businesses might be limited right now, but law enforcement still has a job to do, and we want to get that word out there, like, hey, be smart, be safe each and every time you get in that vehicle.
When you mention about high speed and the number of tickets being written for what have you seen? Have you seen tickets from some of your fellow troopers for 105 or 110, or how bad is it?
Yeah, almost weekly we're seeing speeds well over 100 miles an hour, and for my 20 years of doing this, I've never seen anything quite like that. So just definitely the direction we don't want to be heading.
So what is the deterrent? Because I know, especially people here in North Dakota, they know how much more expensive tickets are in Minnesota versus North Dakota. So do you need to have higher fines? How do you deter this? How do you change this?
Well, I tell you what, it's about the choices you make. Because once we've stopped, maybe truth is the damage could have been done before that. So we hope to get it out through information, through education, because when we talk about the enforcement campaigns, whether it's DWI seatbelt, like what we have going on right now, the goal is never about the number of tickets we write or arrests we make. It's trying to prevent that very thing, because if we can get that information out ahead of time, that people are making those smart choices, again, we're going to be ahead in that sense of saving lives, because we're going to see a lot less crashes, and in particular those fatal crashes that are, just killing so many people out here.
Are you seeing a lot of despondent drivers, suicidal people behind the wheel too, Jess?
Have seen some of that too. Yes, we have seen some of that.
Is that something you guys usually do when you make a traffic stop on somebody who's speeding or whatever violation? Is that usually one of your questions, like, where are you going in such a hurry? Or I don't know if they have to answer you, but you guys usually ask them where they're off to in such a hurry?
Well, I tell you what, I think that's just what good law enforcement does, is engaging in conversation with anybody when you're stopping them. You want to get the whole context of the stop. Is there a reason why you're driving so fast? That's just a basic question I think any officer asks that subject that we're dealing with in a situation, just to kind of get the whole feel for it. Because when you do stop, you do have some suspicions that you need to rule out. Okay, what's the reason for this? Is it is it alcohol? Is it drugs? There's all these things that you're trying to recognize, is there other issues going on here when we're having that brief contact with whoever we may be dealing with. So there's a lot of information going on there in a short amount of time, and it's being able to recognize those clues, those indicators that are a big part of that, to put that whole situation together and figure out what's going on, and what else do we need to do here.
We're visiting with Minnesota State Patrol Sgt. Jesse Grabow here on the KFGO Morning Crew. And, there was quite a time where we really couldn't do a whole lot, and social distancing was encouraged, get out in the great outdoors. Maybe people were traveling to other areas. You're here in the rural part of the state, Jess. Are you seeing more traffic out there in general?
Yeah. I mean, for my experience, what I'm seeing on the roadways, traffic is definitely up. I mean, that period, though, from, Memorial Weekend through Labor Day is our 100 most travel days on our roadways. But still, with, school being back and different things like that resuming, you see a significant amount of traffic over here in the Lakes Country, too. This week in particular, just saw a lot of people taking the docks, the lifts, and things like that. So seeing a little more boat traffic, maybe heading not so much east, but heading maybe back west. So we're seeing some of that too. So that is definitely a factor also.
And there was always that good old saying, and I don't know if it was the public's or law enforcement, you kind of keep with the flow of traffic. Well, it seems like traffic is flowing awful fast lately. Well,
it's just each and every person needs to be responsible for, what they're operating at the time. And you get in a vehicle with your family, your friends. I mean, we need to look out for each other. Speak up if you see something, like, hey, stay off the phone, or make sure you put that seatbelt on. That's, it's just those little things that can make the big difference and helping prevent some of those tragedies.
So if somebody, say, is that lead vehicle and they're speeding, they're going, maybe 15 miles over the speed limit, but then there's, another half dozen vehicles behind them because that guy's going first. Is the trooper going to pull over just that first vehicle, Jess?
Well, it depends on each situation. I mean, it could be that one. It could be, it could be the whole group, depending on things. There's times where we'll work with, law enforcement work, not just alone, but together, whether we're running lasers. Sometimes we'll have an airplane up in the air working together with several law enforcement troopers or maybe even other agencies. So it just kind of depends on each situation. It is possible to get a group.
And give us a reminder here, because as Doug had mentioned earlier, there's a lot of people that know, North Dakota's fines aren't very high, so I'm not going to worry about a $15, $20 ticket. What does a speeding ticket cost you in Minnesota, Jess?
A basic minimum speeding ticket in Minnesota will run you starting right around about $125, $130 in most counties.
Yikes. And what, generally speaking, over the limit are we going to get maybe pulled over? As I know that's probably discretion of each trooper, but what's kind of a guideline there?
Boy, that's a good question, Bonnie. I tell you what, for doing this job for 20 years, that's probably the most common question I get. And, everybody's, when it comes to law enforcement, does, maybe does that a little differently as far as their discretion, what they give you. But I tell you what, you need to drive the speed limit or drive according to the conditions, because that could be changing here too with, just around the corner, right?
Yeah, no kidding. And and I've been noticing a lot of extra enforcement, especially on the interstate corridor. And I would imagine that is what we're seeing, especially during the various campaigns. The one that just ended was the DWI, but now you mentioned that the Buckle Up and Drive Smart campaign that is underway currently. That's why we're seeing maybe some stepped up enforcement as well.
Oh, certainly, yes. We're right. We've got the seatbelt enforcement going on right now. So you've heard that ticket for years now, click it or ticket. And a lot of times we'll have contact with people and you stop them for that seatbelt violation. I always ask if they're aware of it, if they've heard of it. And I think it's one of those things that's been around for a number of years. Pretty much everybody has heard of it. So it's one of those things we want to keep getting that word out there, because, again, we'd rather, you hear it here or social media or whatever, and you're doing that, putting that seatbelt on each and every time you get in that vehicle, and make sure every seat is buckled up. I mean, having done this job as long as I've had, you hear a number of excuses on why a person isn't wearing a seatbelt. I mean, hundreds, maybe thousands of reasons why you wouldn't, but not one of those reasons will save your life.
Yeah, and it just makes me shake my head, too, especially since, kids who are now in their 30s, they grew up in a car seat, that to see people under the age of 35 or whatever it is who aren't wearing a seatbelt, it just kind of floors me when you hear that story.
It does.
All right, Jess, hey, thanks for your time this morning. We sure appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me. You guys take care and be safe.
Yep, you too. Yeah, it didn't take me long to decide that I wasn't going to speed in Minnesota once they'd raised those fines. I don't know how many years back. It was probably a half dozen years back. Haven't caught me speeding. Nope. I don't have all that kind of extra money.